Wonderful. Well, good afternoon to everybody. My name is Arik Burakovsky. I'm the Associate Director of the Russia and Eurasia Program here at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. We're happy to have you join us for our panel discussion titled Georgia's Political Crisis, Domestic Unrest, and Global Implications. We have a number of people online, and please note that the event is being recorded. Over the past year, Georgia has faced a turbulent period marked by the passage of the controversial foreign agents legislation last May, the disputed parliamentary election last October, mass protests, and growing concerns over democratic backsliding. These events are unfolding against the backdrop of shifting global dynamics, including changing U.S. foreign policy priorities under the second Trump administration, Georgia's stalled EU accession, and increasing pressure from Russia. Today, we will explore the key questions at the heart of the ongoing political crisis in Georgia. Some of the questions I provided in the event announcement, but some of the more important questions are: what do these developments reveal about the future of democracy in Georgia? How is the government's response to the protests affecting civil society and the rule of law? And what role do external actors, whether the United States, the EU, Russia, or other neighboring countries, play in shaping Georgia's political trajectory? So to help us unpack these complex issues, we have four esteemed experts, all of them from Georgia, from fields like international security, international relations, sociology, psychology, journalism, and history. I look forward to having a thought-provoking conversation, and I encourage all of you to engage with our distinguished speakers as we seek to better understand what lies ahead for Georgia. I'm honored to moderate this conversation and introduce each of them. Each panelist will have around 5 minutes to give opening remarks, and I'll try to be strict about the time limits, and then we will invite questions from all of you. So our first speaker is Dr. Marine Chitashvili, who is a professor of psychology at Tbilisi State University and currently a visiting scholar with the program on Georgian Studies at the Davis Center for Russian and Eurasian Studies at Harvard University. Her research interests are authoritarianism, personality, and their social dimensions. So Marina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and I will start. It's always difficult to start, but I will start from the questions that you gave us. I will talk about how the perception was, how people perceived the elections results, and what is the let's say, fresh insights on the ongoing protests that tomorrow it will be 100 days standing in the streets. So it's very clear that it's very straightforward, that division between those who accept the elections and those who don't is that what is their political affiliation. Those who are supporting Georgian dream, so they simply said that everything is fair, etc. And those who do not accept, so they say that it was fraud. However, the division between the Georgian dream, formally 54%, and the four opposition parties who got in total 46%, is very close, and it means even good ground to escalate the crisis in Georgia. Immediately after the elections, two companies who were during the election campaign were in Georgia and tracing the process. It was Edison Research and Harris X. So they simply provided the final results, saying that it's statistically impossible to have such type of the percentage, and they both claimed that it's around 30% plus what Georgian Dream got in the election. So it means that it's 41% plus 13 what they added. So there is a very clear experience in Georgia that 6-8% generally is used by the administrative resources to add to this voting. So there are some criteria, etc., but the 13% was too much. And protest, by the way, began not because of this type of the fraud, because there was the call for the protest by the political parties, but there were very few, and the manifestation was dissolved, and there was no big problem. All this started the 28th of November, when Georgian Dream declared they are stopping the EU accession process until 2028. And I would say that it was the last drop, because it meant the change, violation of the constitution, changing this 30 years, let's say, hope and looking for the accession to EU, and plus betrayal to the all Western partners who helped a lot to the independence of Georgia. What I can say, what is the insight about this political activism? It is very peculiar one, because there is no any political party or political leader or politicians who are engaged professionally in the field. Is the pure political civil activism. And so I can continue about that, but what I want to say that these civil activists already have the new leaders, meaning that people who can talk, and who can talk not on the issues that generally politicians are talking about, but about the social and economic issues. And these political leaders are coming, let's say, from the ground of the academia or just civil servants. And what is very, how to say, for me personally, what is very good, that it is somehow changing the political culture in Georgia as a society. We are traditional society, and the entire social capital was built on the principle of bonding. Right now, we are bridging, building up the social capital, because there are a lot of professional associations, and there are the who are just taking the responsibility, and so we are trying somehow to resist what is going now, not only in Georgia, but generally all over the world. And if there was the hope that someone will listen outside and someone will have some strength to change the situation locally. So just now it's the clear message that we have to take care of ourselves. I think I fit in time.
Yes. And so our next speaker is Lasha Kveseladze, who is a Nieman Fellow at Harvard University, focusing on open source investigative techniques and Russian influence in the Caucasus. A seasoned investigative journalist with 20 years of experience, he co-founded the Journalistic Data Processing Center and created Connections, a tool for exposing hidden links between business and government. His recent reporting has focused on Russian sanctions evasion schemes and the financial backing of Kremlin-linked far-right groups in Georgia. Lasha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ari. Thanks for inviting. And I would like to address the situation about Georgian media, because it's a very difficult situation. We have journalists, very good journalists, Zviad Adzinbaia, in jail for a very not serious allegation. And we have new laws in parliament initiated, which is threatening Georgian media to disappear literally maybe in 2 months in the environmental sector. And all this started 2 years ago, when the so-called foreign agent law was initiated, and we had massive protests, you remember, and government stepped back then, but then last summer, in May last summer, initiated again, and we had those protests that we are witnessing now started a year ago, and government adopted this law. But all the critical media organizations and non-governmental organizations refused to register. It was a matter of honor to register in the registry of foreign agents, and they couldn't enforce it. They didn't enforce the law so far. So only like a handful of organizations are registered in the registry, but none of the high quality, well, those who are high quality journalists working on that. And we have, I would like to know that we have wonderful media organizations doing some wonderful work, like wonderful investigations, and including the organization like Media founded by Zia Maglubeli, Patumalebi, and Netgazeti. They're outstanding media organizations. That is the situation. Then now government is going to make some amendment to the broadcasting law to cut like all kind of funding from like donor organizations, and also the same like also self-regulation. We are self-regulated now, and the government will put its hands on this issue. And the communication committee will decide if my story will be objective or not, ethical or not, etc. And if needed to take the license from the station. And also like cutting the USAID funds and NED funds to those media organizations which that are doing critical working on the critical issues. It's just, you know, they cannot survive. I just literally talk to like Studio Monitoring and IFACT, outstanding organization, and it will be very hard. They had some decision to register outside of the country. It was a kind of temporary measure to survive and still day-to-day doing the great work. But those parliament members who initiated the law threatened that we know that you register outside of the country, so we'll close that gap as well. So yeah, that's the most painful issue for me nowadays. Yeah, and that's one of the core issues as well among the other we have like, and probably, and Malkhaz also will talk about it. We have many like people beaten by police during the protests, and none of the cases of violence by policemen is investigated. And Zia for slapping the policeman because she was really stressed, like working on the stress situations, and like she is held in prison and denied even by appeal court to wait for the decision outside. So thank you.
Thank you. And we can expand upon these issues in the conversation and Q&A session. So our next speaker is Zviad Adzinbaia, who is a PhD candidate at the Fletcher School, specializing in disinformation, digital resilience, and international security. He is the co-founder of LeadX, a multinational leadership accelerator and a summit based in Tbilisi, engaging leaders from more than 20 countries. He is a recognized expert in digital diplomacy and information integrity. And of course, he comes from Georgia and originally from Abkhazia. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, this is also my home here at the Fletcher School, so I'm grateful to be surrounded by Georgian friends here, and thank you, Arik, for organizing it. Couple things. I'm just actually coming from Kyiv. I flew in yesterday, and there is a lot. Couple things. I'll just throw out some nuggets of my observations. In Kyiv, whatever happens affects Georgia in real time. Even a perception or a conversation story affects Georgia in real time, emotionally, practically, politically, technically. So there is, because we're talking about geopolitical implications. So if you care about Georgia, I know you guys do, and then you probably most likely hear about Ukraine, but whatever happens in Ukraine tomorrow, day after, in coming months, whatever the deal is, or whether there's no deal, that's going to affect Georgia. That's number one. I'm also based in Washington, D.C. now, so I'll share a little bit about it, what Washington thinks, or whether Washington thinks anything right now, because whether Georgia is too small a fish, and what, for instance, one Truth Social post might do in real life on the scene, mobilize a public attention, or demobilize it, or discourage it. That's quite true there. Third thing is, I'll share some numbers. Professor Chitashvili mentioned parsecs. So at the time when I can say it now, when the exit poll was done, I was senior advisor to parsecs. And I'm currently officially senior advisor to parsecs for international engagement. So I can speak a little bit. It's a 2 or 3 week old news. So even my family might learn about it from this, recording, because my mom's gonna probably watch it. Speaking about elections, what parsecs concluded, it was analysis done beyond human emotions. It was done really with the cold blood in mind to avoid bias, but employ science. parsecs found out a group of some of the smartest people that I have ever met, theoretical mathematicians and statisticians and political scientists and others. They had no reason to be biased, but produced something that was, as parsecs believed, statistically improbable or impossible. So parsecs found out that 172,502 votes, 172,502 votes were allocated to benefit the government in ways that were statistically impossible or improbable. And parsecs urged the Central Election Commission to explain that. Of course, they never did, because if you explain it, then you will probably need to say where did it go, or where did it come from. For instance, there are instances where more people voted than existed. One, so how's that happen? Are we dealing with supervillains or any other unknowns beyond our cognition? I don't know. 170,000. That's point number one. Point number two, we've seen Washington's reaction until December. Guess why? Because the previous administration's deeper focus on Georgia, but also larger issues of democracy. And there was an anticipation that the world would get more transactional, and Georgia is too small to be discussed in a transaction, and sometimes transaction might swallow a place like Georgia. That has happened before. And when the Russians came and invaded us in 2008, it took only a couple of months. A big transaction happened solely at the expense of Georgia, actually. And the US and Russia reset relationship that lasted not too long, unfortunately, or whatever we call it. There was only a couple of months of Bush administration and some tense relationships, but then at the expense of Georgia, there was a resumption of relationship that didn't last long. So Georgians, feel the price of transaction, actually, and they also fear that same or even more frameworks of transaction being applied to Ukraine that will affect Georgians by default. So they're bracing for impact and do not have a lot of protectors. That's 2. 3, and I will not go too long. Probably we could explore more throughout the conversation. 3, what Washington thinks. Finding number one, I'm based in Washington now. I had daily relationships with people who think of Georgia, care about Georgia. There's I started a weekly brief called Georgia Espresso Brief. So if you guys want to hear from me weekly, just shoot me your email and I'll include you in my list. But I tried to explain in my Espresso briefs to some of the core people, some of the main stakeholders, across the board, why should they care about Georgia? I'm not trying to overly convince anybody, but try to be as brief and as analytical and as strong as Espresso can be. But basically, Washington currently doesn't care about Georgia. It might be good. I don't know, because it depends on how you care. If you care and if you want to support the Georgian movement and liberty movement and civil resistance movement, then you don't close NED or you don't close USAID, because that's been 30 years of United States support. But that's happening differently, and I think the movement on the ground, we can talk about it too. In Georgia is not the same size all the time, but they have demonstrated for days and weeks, 100,000, 200,000 people. But one thing that I have managed tomorrow, 100 days. So without tomorrow, Georgian civil resistance movement has closed down the main square 99 times every day and every night. 99 times. They've closed the public square, and Fletcher School knows what it means to claim the public square, that this is our square and cannot take it away from us. There are harsh conditions and everything. But I think, long story short, Washington is silent. And even though Washington is quite noisy in other corners of the neighborhood, but I think there's that. We can discuss what's the hope or what's the expectation ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Malkhaz Toria, who is an associate professor of history and the director of the Memory Studies Center in the Caucasus at Ilia State University in Tbilisi. I understand he's also currently a visiting scholar at the Davis Center at Harvard University. And he is a doctoral candidate in sociology at the New School for Social Research in New York City. His research focuses on theories of history and the epistemology of historical knowledge, Tsarists and Soviet imperial legacies, and the politics of identity, belonging, and boundary making in contemporary Georgia, memory politics, modern museology and memorial culture, and the instrumentalization of history and politics of exclusion and ethnic cleansing in Abkhazia and South Ossetia. Malkhaz, please.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be part of this wonderful panel. And my colleagues covered important political, statistical aspects or journalistic coverage or the problems the civil society is facing in Georgia. I would like to focus today more on symbolic constituent of this. I would call nationwide resistance, unlike other demonstrations, protest movements previously in Georgia, like last time, so-called foreign agent law was, resisted and protested in the capital, other towns. But now, after this kind of pivotal moment, which I call at the point of no return, when government stopped the accession process to the EU, that means that the very essence of symbolic imaginary of Georgian society was attacked or undermined. That is pro-Western orientation, which is pretty much understood as civilizational kind of positioning of Georgian society, which did not start like yesterday. We can trace these roots of this imaginary late 19th century when founding fathers of Georgian nationalism kind of envisioned Georgia's path, either democracy or other path. They knew there was a Russian way. So now what Georgian society or Georgian people is protesting is against this tectonic shattering of this their understanding of their not only past but the future too. So that's why I would like to say a little bit more on how this weaponization of history and historical disinformation, and you are specialist on disinformation, but there is also
Disinformation. Yeah.
there is also historical disinformation kind of invading the past in order to structure policy and then the future. So the far-right groups in Georgia, and unfortunately the current official establishment is kind of ally of these far-right groups, and official ideology is right-wing populism. So they try to selectively approach to the past, sort of justify anti-Western rhetoric by using and abusing the historical figures, characters, in order to sort of justify the anti-Western shift which current government is pursuing, and that means that downplaying of Soviets against resistance against Soviet rule, or kind of manipulation of collective memory. So what should be done in this case? We know that society every day, civil activists, ordinary people, professors, students are every day protesting and voicing their protest. But what should be done in terms of sort of oppose this tendency? Like me, historian or sociologist or other colleagues, the important thing is to do as much as possible to raise awareness of authoritarian logic of such sort of memory politics, which is the bedrock of the policy as such, and that means that it will be the way of resisting or claiming the truth against the post-truth reality, Russian-style post-truth reality we are facing now elsewhere, and including in our region.
Thank you. Well, we have plenty of time for a conversation now. I'm happy to ask questions, but perhaps there are questions from the audience. I'm happy to take them. Raise your hand, please.
Can start. You touched a little bit on the emergence of leaders in the civil society and how kind of they've been leading the movements from grassroots up. But what would take for these people to transition to a political arena? We haven't seen a new political force in quite a while. There isn't much kind of refreshment on the ballot box when you vote during the elections. What would it take for these people to found their own parties, be an option?
Thank you very much. It's a very good question, and it's one of the crucial points. I will start with the current example. So 2 weeks ago, the new movement, left wing, let's say so, Social Democrats were founded as a new movement. So they went to the Justice Palace to register, and in 2 days they received the back answer that they have to make some corrections, and afterwards the official structure disappeared somewhere. They are trying to approach and abolishing or just violating all regulations, so there is no answer. So these people are already struggling almost 2 weeks. This is, let's say, small formality. The another thing is that how the movements can be, how this new emerged, how the new faces can gather. So it reminds me that it's end of 80s, beginning of 90s, when there was such type of the intention from academia and intellectuals to create sort of the national front like the Estonia did, but it does not work. Because the academics like to talk a lot and they are thinking, and they do not have such strive just to follow the political activism rules. And those who are just behind on the scene, I even joked that they would become excellent members of parliament. But I do not see the people who are really somehow having this energy or charisma, who can just mobilize people. So it's very good example. For example, President Zurabishvili was not someone who was loved by the entire population, but as soon as she was acting, let's say, at least as some consolidator figure for the parliament. So the Rustaveli Avenue was full with 200,000 people. And it's very clear message that there is a demand for someone just to take everything in hands. So it sounds very, let's say, Bolshevik slogan, but there is no party who can take this chance. And I would say that our political opposition lost this chance during all this preparatory period for the elections. So yes, there are excuses that they are not so well funded as the Georgian dream, but so there is not everything deductible to the finances. So it seems to me that it will grow up little by little, but how much time we have, I have no idea. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation. And I'm not too educated about Georgian politics, but the question would be, how much is the role of the current non-political elite, including the business, media, and civil society? You said that the foreign agent law has been challenging a lot, but still those people exist. And do they play actively in the current resistance or not, and how?
Lasha, do you want to?
I'll be very brief. We saw more than 2,000 businesses. Actually, usually in places like Georgia, the civil society is driven by donors because, the country didn't have a lot of time to do grassroots development of civil society. It was a slow process, but this, good news, if there's a good news to be found here, is that even at the level of small entrepreneurship, small business, corner shop, there is a reclaiming or claiming of a deeper responsibility commitment. So if civil society before was understood as some kind of, NGOs or, NGO academia collaboration, now we have we have shops, small businesses, bigger businesses, getting more and more vocal. In a post, I hate this term. At some point I don't want to call Georgia or any other neighbors a post-Soviet, but in the space, that businesses don't like to be vocal or engaged in democracy, but they're increasingly finding out that, unless they do, someone's going to decide it for them. So that there is that. Many businesses got attacked. And I hope that in a immediate term, and a medium term, they get bolder, especially in the absence of development aid. They have to self-fund. And Georgian politics and the issue of funding, it's a scapegoat to blame funding for not having ideas or courage to lead. Sure, funding is important, but ideas get financed, especially in Georgia. And Georgians see they're not stupid. And, they donate $1 or $5 and they'll commit to it. But, ideas matter. And, Georgian politicians need to find out ways how to act like a startup entrepreneurially and show people that there is an idea to be followed. Otherwise, you can never compete an oligarch. You can never match the money because oligarch is an oligarch. So you need to be a little more creative.
Yeah. And I would touch the role of the media again. So, like, besides those breakdowns on media, they're heroes. Like, they're working without payment sometimes for several months. And I'm working, like, before coming here, I was still doing story for the main channel, Tavari Arhi, we call it, and it's silenced now because oligarch always finds a way to find some kind of issue, the dispute between shareholders, and now currently my colleagues cannot work. Like we can still have a Facebook page and it still operates, but it won't last long. It will not last long. So, and my colleagues at Parmula TV, TV Peer Valley, and other organizations like many times attacked Mountain News and iFact and Monitor. Yeah, they're heroes because if we didn't have them, there will be no information to navigate in this extremely polarized society. Like, because as you know, like we have like strong governmental media, and we have some far right groups that Malkhaz mentioned, and they have their own channels and becoming stronger and stronger, and it's interesting how are they funded as well. So like in this extremely polarized situation, the role of media is crucial, and they're still existing. But as I mentioned, like within 2 months, they might disappear.
This is a very important question, and I also would like to include the one of the most important segment of this, as you mentioned, the politically active or socially active segment of society, which is like academia, universities. And here we see this economic pressure from the government because they want to undermine this economic constituent of this protest too. Like it reminds me like a Foucauldian governmentality approach, like a panopticon's idea when these cameras are everywhere and they charge people, fine people like an immense amount of money for regular, considering Georgia's economic situation, the fine they are putting on the people is really important, and in this sense, the remaining public spaces, like open spaces, where this resistance will be expressed and something planned in terms of gathering or protesting or demonstration. The government now, as you mentioned, they will kind of narrow the media space, but they will also, as authoritarian logic guides, they will approach the academic spaces too, in order to shut down every possible corner of the free space. So it's a kind of cookbook. We can follow step by step, and we will kind of. It doesn't need to be a Cassandra to envision or forecast what our future is, but unless there is something happens which turns out their table and government's table. So hopefully that will happen, because not everything is going as oligarchs or government want, hopefully.
Great. We had more hands, please.
Just very briefly, following up on all said. One comment on the panel. There's been a great deal of discussion of the opposition. There's been almost no discussion of the government. And, you should know your enemy. But that's just an aside. I guess looking at the situation in Georgia now, where you have a rather disorganized but very active opposition engaged in more or less continual protests, not least on Tufts University. You have a government which is gradually escalating its suppression. Some of you know that I don't actually ask anything about the future, but on this occasion I will. What is the future here? There will be a confrontation. When will it be? How will it emerge? And what will the result be?
Well, and I think as part of that, if we are looking to the future, sometimes it's helpful to look to the past. And we've seen instances where people power has been effective in the post-Soviet space. And one of them is the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2003. And yet, even though there may be some echoes to that period, the situation today is very different. So maybe you can contrast the two and give us some lessons about what that holds for the future.
Since I hold the mic, I could start. This is, as a historian, we like parallels and see continuation on ruptures in the history. Is there any dynamic or development? Like, should we see history as some kind of teleology, or is just a different period, just chronologically change each other? Of course, the Rose Revolution was an important moment in the modern history of Georgia, and because the mass demonstration and mass expression of the will was somehow realized. but that's what time when there was a still belief of liberal democracy elsewhere. So the time perspective, temporality of the future was sort of defined that the optimistic, not as extreme as like a Fukuyama predicted in the beginning, but still there was a faith in liberal democracy. Now we are considering the larger context of march of illiberal regimes elsewhere. So I consider Georgia as some kind of fragment or manifestation of this larger tendency, which unfortunately not really optimistic. So in terms of structuring the event itself, like a Rose Revolution as an event and this uprising is as an event maybe shows some similarities, but there are many differences. Like as Professor Chitashvili mentioned, like back then there was a charismatic leader. Now there is no individual who sort of mobilize the crowd, and this is bottom-up mobilization, which is incredible, but still not enough as we see. So the prediction, the comparison shows that there is a fundamental differences between these two occurrences, from my point of view, of course. But that means also there may be some other solution device, because we need this. We see this collective creativity, which is very important for such an event, because people devise many means of resistance, like how to trick police, for instance. They designed application like tracking the police is coming, and in solidarity kind of solidarity examples between among the protesters. This is maybe this gives us some hope that there will be not just gathering, but something new, maybe new foundation laid on for different Georgia. I don't know.
I'll say a word. Immediate reflection on the Rose Revolution. Fletcher School cares about movements, because Fletcher School is teaches and practices civil resistance, especially nonviolent strategic civil resistance. The couple differences. One is that when you're doing nonviolent civil action, depends on who's on the other side. So when the Rose Revolution happened, Georgia was governed by a weak government, but the president of Georgia was a high-level politician with some credible measures, and he understood larger scale politics, and him stepping aside was actually one move seen like it, especially, assessing from now. He respected things that Americans thought or the world thought of him, or he took, he was not an oligarch per se. His government was one of the most corrupt ones, but he saw some things. So it also matters quite deeply. Who are you dealing with? Another comparison is, in the past 15 years or so, civil resistance movements have seen a sea change in efficiency. For one, and one of the big reasons is that authoritarians have increasingly figured out the way how to crack down on media, civil society, political actors, use whatever the Russians call active measures. Not only disinformation, but discredit, forgeries, attack, imprison, and strategically use the notion of fear. Even science shows that if you fear something, it overwhelms your ability to hope. That was a big deal here in the recent elections. That's used in Hungary. That's used in many other countries where authoritarians are still there and might stay for a long time. So fear is a big deal. And one more point in leadership. If you ask me back in September, what Georgians deserve, I'll tell you, Georgian movement or electors want the, opposition of Luxembourg, and Georgian opposition wants the voters of Luxembourg. And I would say none of them deserve each other, or they deserve current version of each other. But I think that the protest, I don't call it protest because it's civil resistance movement. Protest is just one segment of it. There's many things that take place in Georgia, not only in Tbilisi, across the country, like daily resistance in a bus or in a university or at a business, in a shop, at a coffee place. But currently the civil society, real grassroots civil society, have shown creativity and potential that I think they deserve more than I thought they, by they, I also mean myself, I'm a citizen of Georgia. But one thing that we haven't seen yet is that that potential has not been translated into an institutional body. A small party can do it. I think if you ask me what kind of party Georgia needs a party that can blend liberal and conservative agendas together. We can talk about later, but the government claims the values discussion and conservative discussion. Georgia is conservative. The government is as conservative as, no, government is not conservative. They're just opportunist. They're oligarchic, and they steal everything they can in a power dynamic sense and sometimes financial sense. But how to blend, how to make sure that people don't fear liberalism, right? Someone's going to come and take your personality and identity. It's, non-existent discussion, but real for many people. So a blend of liberalism and conservatism in a very delicate way would make a sea change in Georgia, in my view. I can prove it with data later.
Can I?
Please.
So thank you very much for your question, because it is one of the let's say existential question for the staying in the streets. And it's not about the, it's mainly about the ethics and the morality. As well, several, let's say, semi-leaders or informal leaders, because people, it goes on, and people have questions how long we have to stay here. Because what the government is doing is absolutely dedicated ignorance. They do not see these people. They do not consider these are the voting. They are just saying something. So, and it's sometimes the sin is when they, for the 20,000 people, so leaders say there are only 400 people staying there. So it's, I would say that it's a real battle with the government who has no any acceptance of the values that are, that makes human. So they simply do not accept and do not see the another one. They have their ideas that is only truth, what they are providing, and they literally, they are trying to escalate just the clash. So the main standing until today is that it's a peaceful movement, because this peaceful movement is the only strength that makes these people to stay there. And I can just give the very small example. It's not so that in any community, everyone is just pro-government or pro-opposition. I'm talking about my professional community. So there are quite, let's say, 50-50. And until now, there was no any, let's say, possible situation that our colleagues who from the full heart support the Georgian dream can somehow tell something about us, because we strictly are following ethics of professional conduct. Even though we were the first who put the entire report with the international organization about the torture of the people during these protest times, and it's officially, it's now everyone can read, but we strictly follow the ethics. And one of the informal leaders said that it's the matter of depending the value to be the human. It's just for what you are standing here, because it takes from yours the freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and it takes simply the freedom of the development as a human you can choose. So it seems to me that in our case, as Malkhaz said, it's not purely political. It's also existential in terms of keeping the civil society, at least somehow, that keeps about the humanity and human values. So otherwise, I'm frankly speaking, I am all time afraid when the escalation goes in that way that it could be ended up with the clash. And one thing what Zviad said, in 2003, there was the government led by the politician. In 2024, there is no one as a politician in government. There is a big difference.
Thank you. So because we're at the Fletcher School, I will have to ask you about the geopolitical situation. Of course, we've discussed the lack of a response from the United States, but I wonder how the situation affects Georgia's international standing and its relationships with neighboring countries, Abkhazia, South Ossetia issues, and its relationship with the EU and Azerbaijan, Armenia, but also the big elephant in the room, which is Russia. Georgian Dream has long had a narrative that it is balancing strategically between Russia and the West. I wonder to what extent it may now be fully aligning with Moscow while continuing this rhetoric that it has long had.
Please, it's not my job.
I'll try to brief. When it comes to neighbors, or Azerbaijan is as transactional as can get, and you don't expect a lot of democracy discussions from Baku, and they usually align with the incumbent, so that there's not much. And same goes with Turkey. Good thing is that we don't talk much about Turkey in terms of small political terms. Still, Turkey is the only neighbor of Georgia who's NATO member and land bridge. Like Turkey is the only country Georgia has border demarcation with. So we don't talk much. Armenia is really difficult position when it comes to Georgia. I hate the fact that Armenian prime minister keeps inviting the prime minister of Georgia, and there's a lot of transaction going. But I tell my Armenian friends, I don't talk about much about it, because Armenia is in a really tough spot now. They don't have a lot of options, so they need some transactions. They need some roadways to happen for them, for their critical survival, actually, at this point. So I hate it, but I also understand it to a degree. When it comes to Russia, and Arik mentioned alignment. There's when you say something, you're a Georgian politician, you're balancing with Russia, you're playing something. Like you got something to hide, not because a power like Georgia is not a big power. Powers balance things. How do you usually compromise in a kind of in the case of Georgia? You can't balance. You can balance if you're the United States of America. You can balance if you're the UK. You can balance if you're Poland. In Central Eastern Europe, big power, big military, meaningful economy, and so on and so forth. Turkey can balance. Georgia cannot balance. When you say that we're balancing, we're framing things, but you're kind of cheating as group of politicians. Russians love it. What is happening in Georgia for one strategic reason? They don't need to deploy troops. Well, first off, militarily they're not looking good, so they don't want or need one more military adventure beyond whatever they already have in two occupied regions of Georgia, one of which is my home in Abkhazia. But they have a client government, and they have essentially like practical representatives of their ideas. But one thing actually that even though they're saying Russia and orthodoxy or strategic partners or whatever, even the Georgian Dream cannot say they're pro-Russian. That even they promise to their electors, this is important for wider sense to apply, that, you know, we come to power, we lead you to the European Union. They use like European Union stars in their campaigning and colors and symbols. They say like, we drive you, and 4 weeks after the election, with like massively, you know, fraudulent election, they say we no longer do that. So like they directly told their voters that, you know, whatever we told you kind of changed. So those are things America is, I mentioned, I think, is hibernating when it comes to Georgia. And I'd rather see America hibernating right now than roaring in manners that America does, so that Georgia doesn't crack as a result. It breaks my heart, but.
Just a small remark. I prefer to remain as a journalist during this question, but like one thing that I would like to mention, and we didn't talk about it before, that how is Georgian Dream now managing the situation? They have proposed a message too, but if we do not support, like if we do not align with Russia, it's not in the sentence, but it's implied. Do we want war? So this is the main message, how they manage their electorate. And this message had a tremendous influence in the Georgian society. And nobody from Georgian opposition has explained and what to do, how to react, and what does it mean in this situation. Does it definitely mean a war, or should we help as like Georgia as a country? Should we help a country who is killing civilians and children? Like, I mean, the allegations about like helping with evading sanctions. Is it worse? Should we ask this question? But do you want a war? Is it mean to be part and participate in killing? So this is the one of the core like kind of messages that hasn't been addressed properly, to my understanding. I don't know.
It's just a couple of comments about. I understand that geopolitics is really important, and this is really difficult situation, really complex, multi-layered. But just explaining the developments in Georgia based on this political realism and geopolitics is kind of could be misleading, because I like the using Weber's term about elective affinity. There was no any challenge like past 3 to 3 years, and we had an open opportunity to join the EU, but Georgian government stopped it. Why? Not because someone was pressuring them, like, you know, give up this idea or we, you know, invade you, but because there's some similarities between, you know, aspirations probably. And I would also add what you suggested, like a marriage of conservatism and liberalism. I would say more important would be liberalism and social agenda is more important to merge, focusing on structural inequality, economic inequality. Progressive liberalism would be, for me, the solution, not because too many conservatives, too many focus on national identity. We have 3 decades of study I'm interested in epistemology. We are mostly exploring identities, which is very important for Georgia, but we are not seeing the structural context of even the identity manifestations. So I think social agenda, nationalism, and liberalism could be better configured in order to answer to the demands of broad array of within Georgian society.
Any final
No,
thoughts, Marina?
I'm
Well,
fine.
I think we're out of time, and I apologize to those of you who still have your hands raised. I have
Which is great.
many more questions as well, and I wish we could continue the conversation, but please join me in a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you, everyone.